You're now watching an excerpt from a Terrace podcast episode exclusive to our Patreon website. If you would like to listen to the podcast in full, head over to patreon.com/Terrace podcast, where you can unlock this show and thousands of hours worth of bonus content.
Thom, I mean, let's get your true feels. How did you feel when, no hindsight here, I want you to transport yourself back to 35 days ago or something, when Neil Warnock was named, and then the fact that he was going to be there to the end of the season as a stopgap. What was your original feelings on that?
So I think regardless of who it was, we'll take out the fact it was Neil Warnock. Regardless of the fact that it was a caretaker until the end of the season was a concern. Like that bit,
okay,
that was the bit that for me was the biggest red flag. Like it had been given to, and that job had been given to anybody till the end of the season, a couple of days after the closure of the transfer window. Mm-hmm. So regardless of who was coming in, and if the board were going to sack Barry Robson, there was results at the end of last year or even during January that would have been a time for somebody else to come in, do a bit of work with the squad, deal around with it, and figure out what to do with the remainder of the season. So timings were bad. The fact that it was a caretaker and there wasn't any faith that, or certainly I didn't have an awful lot of faith that the caretaker idea was that there was any, there was a sense there was a better manager available in the summer. It was like, right, we'll buy ourselves some time until we can figure out what to do next.
Where are we now? What's the plan?
That is the £12.5 million question, because it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. There was not a plan for what to do when Barry Robson was sacked. There was clearly not a plan for what we were going to do after Neil Warnock's. If the idea being he comes in, takes it till the summer, and we see what's available. It doesn't sound like there was any coherent plan for what was to come after Warnock. For him to be no longer in a job a month later, and for us to be on, Peter Leaven to be taking the squad for a second game this weekend, and for us to be getting round to interviewing or making an appointment during the international week when we'll have 8 games left of the season. It's rudderless. It feels like top to bottom there is no leadership at that football team. Now I've had grief for this before, but there are good players at that football club. There's a lot of potential. There are some really good young players at that football. That's what makes the situation all the worse. It's that is not like a positive spin on the current situation. That's even worse. The players that are there are far too good to be in the position, but they are, and that that's not a reflection on how good they are ability-wise. It's a reflection on absolutely how bad the attitude has been and how catastrophic, with one notable exception of a run of form and 12 games at the end of last season, the last couple of years have been. There's not been a long-term plan. There's not been a thought for what, and it's lurched from, okay, well, we've got rid of Derek McInnes now. Personally, I don't think that was the wrong decision to get rid of Derek McInnes. I don't think that was a mistake. The mistake was thinking it would be easy to replace him. He'd been an amazing manager for Aberdeen, but the 18 months leading up to the point where he was sacked, recruitment hadn't been good. The football was terrible. We couldn't buy a goal. We signed 3 strikers in one day. I think we scored 2 goals maybe between them. It was bad. So I don't necessarily think that getting rid of him was the wrong decision. There was no the plan for it was thinking it would be easy. It was thinking we'd be able to bring in a coach with no experience
to bring Dave Cormack's barbecue pal.
So we went from lots of experience and deep roots within the club to zero experience and no experience of being a football manager whatsoever. He didn't work out, so we went from no experience of Scottish football whatsoever, to, okay, well, Jim Goodwin's had a good run, and lurch to the other extreme. We've got this guy that's meant to be playing amazing, attacking, expansive football, but he's no experience, and it didn't work. To, okay, well, right, well, he's doing quite well. He's doing, the last couple of weeks
So
he's done quite well. A bit of yeah. Goodwin didn't work out. Okay, so we'll give it to Barry Robson, and we'll figure out. Okay, he started winning some games. Now you get to the stage where you've got to give him the job because he's done such a good job with it. I think part of the reason, in retrospect, hindsight being wonderful, one of the reasons that he did such a good job was he wasn't Jim Goodwin, and it seems like Jim Goodwin clearly, after that week from hell, had just lost the dressing room completely. They were lucky that they didn't. It wasn't like Murder on the Orient Express, and it was like he was stabbed by 15 different people. But they went from Robson with no experience playing, very little experience of working with professionals beyond a youth team level, to the most experienced manager in the history of English football. But none of this having any kind of red thread going through of a style of play, an eye on the longer term. Now, I think there's been a bit of a piss taking on the consultancy with a German
guy. Sorry, that's someone like me who's been doing that. Yeah.
It's absolutely valid because of the situation that you're in. Because the time to do that kind of consultancy would have been last summer when we were doing. We were in a good position. Because if you're going to change the hierarchy of the club or the setup of the club, you do it when things are going well, rather than when it's like, oh shit, we're 9 games for the end of the season and we're 3 points above the relegation playoff spot. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea for the people who have made the last 3 appointments to remove themselves somewhat from the decision as to who's coming next, because the last 3 appointments have been, last 4 appointments have not worked out. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to reach out to anyone to get their thought. But I think the issue that there is now is so we're 9 games for the end of the season. We want somebody to come in and presumably just stop the rot, get to know the squad, have an idea of what they want to do in the summer, and get going again. But you're not having somebody coming in going, oh, we can basically write this season off, and I'll get to know. They've actually got to fight some fires. Somebody's going to come in and actually have to put their reputation on the line, because you don't want to be the one. Like, Aberdeen have never been relegated. You don't want to be the manager that does that. So it's a mess.